Welcome to Going Beyond the Syllabus, conversations inspired by books and powered by experience. I am your host, Dr. Rohini Abhyankar. This keen-supported podcast explores how ideas from influential books come alive through the lived experiences of engineering educators. This episode is inspired by the book Unlearning, Changing Your Beliefs and Your Classroom by Alison Posse and Katie Novak. The authors argue that meaningful improvements in teaching do not begin with new strategies, but with examining and letting go of long-held assumptions about how students learn. The authors suggest that many instructional practices persist simply because they are familiar or widely accepted, even when they do not serve the diverse ways students actually learn. Drawing on universal design for learning framework, the book encourages educators to rethink through assumptions and design learning environments that anticipate learner variability from the start. Rather than trying to fix students when they struggle, the book invites educators to rethink the design of learning experiences so that all students have multiple ways to engage with content, demonstrate understanding, and develop confidence as learners. The central message of the book is that real change in education requires a cycle of reflection, unlearning outdated practices, and redesigning teaching in ways that support curiosity, engagement, and deeper learning. My guest today is my colleague and the co-originator of this podcast idea, Professor Meg Harkins. Meg is a professor of practice at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and a professional civil engineer whose career spans both industry and higher education. Before moving into academia, Meg spent many years working in industry, managing spill cleanup, environmental remediation, and waste permitting in the liquid bulk trucking sector, and later ran her own engineering consulting company. Those experiences gave her first-hand insight into what new engineers really need when they enter the workforce. Today, she focuses on helping students bridge the gap between classroom learning and professional practice through hands-on learning, design experiences, and multidisciplinary capstone projects. Meg, welcome to our podcast, Going Beyond the Syllabus. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Rohini.
So many of the books we discuss on this podcast suggest that meaningful innovation in teaching begins with reflection. You spent many years in industry before moving into engineering education. So looking back, what were some assumptions about teaching or learning that you had to rethink when you entered academia?
Well, in the beginning, I really thought that content coverage was the key. But when I transitioned to academia, I went in and I looked at the first year course that I was teaching, and I somehow thought if I covered all of this, the students will learn it, and then they'll be able to apply it. I didn't recognize the social or cultural differences in learning. I just thought they all basically learn the same way, and the way that I learned in school would apply. But then when I started working with real students, that first semester was a series of revelations. Everyone doesn't learn the same way, and exposure testing on a topic does not equate to understanding. Even for students who are very prepared and receptive, exposure still doesn't equate to being able to apply it. It doesn't really impact them, and they forget it after their first class. So I really tried to script my lectures early on to hit all my points that I wanted to make in the lecture. It's what the Unlearning book called coverage anxiety. But I soon realized that I needed to let go a little bit and to let the students guide the lesson more. Instead of trying to hit all my talking points, I needed to watch for their response and take my cues from that. And that's where I kind of shifted my teaching to a learning goal-oriented style.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think a lot of people go through this process when they first start teaching. But you are open to self-examination and reflection, so that's wonderful. And it also seems like that experience helped reshape how you think about what engineering students actually need. So, was there a moment when you realized that engineering students learn differently than you expected?
Well, my undergrad experience was very traditional lecture, problem set, exam. But I almost dropped out in my second year of school. So I really struggled to learn the material. I struggled because I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And it was hard. And working really hard on something that I didn't see a purpose for, it was frustrating. Fortunately, though, I went to a co-op school. So my school required 3 6-month co-ops during a 5-year undergrad degree. My first co-op was absolutely transformational. The very first thing I learned was what I did not want to do with an engineering degree. And no offense to all the highway designers out there, but halfway through my co-op in highway design, I realized that I could pave over the entire county and it wouldn't be enough. And I really I was frustrated. I didn't see what I was going to do with this education. And I hit a real low point. But it forced me to make a decision. Either I'm going to figure out what I can do with this degree, or I'm going to go do something else. And what I began to see was reflecting on what was important to me, and found that if I saw myself as an environmental engineer, I could see what I could do with the engineering degree. And I came back after my first co-op and I really approached my classes differently. I began to see how I could apply my different classes, and it really changed my purpose in my class. It changed how I thought. And I had forgotten that after years in industry. I forgot what a struggle that was. And when I started to remember that, it really changed how I approached teaching.
Wow, that's quite a story. So, so initially you struggled, and then the co-op learning helped you, and because you had your end goal in sight, and that took priority, your perspective shifted, right? So that's
Yes.
remarkable. Yeah. So that kind of became your motivator, seeing the end goal. So
Yes,
that's very
definitely.
nice. Yeah. So the book Unlearning suggests that improving education often requires letting go of deeply held beliefs about teaching. And you did touch upon it a little in your first answer. So, from your perspective, what are some assumptions about engineering education that faculty may need to unlearn today?
I think the biggest one is that the correct solution isn't the only way to learn the material. That there's a lot of value in working a problem and getting the wrong answer and proving to yourself it's wrong, and finding what the influences are that maybe you underestimated, and then finding the correct path. That makes a more memorable journey. And that's what the student's going to remember more than just, I did the problem, I plugged in an equation, I got an answer. So if the student is totally focused on just getting the right answer, they miss that whole journey. And if they're very pressured by you need to get the right answer to get the grade, they're going to cheat. And then the education system just fails them. So in reality, they need to know how to spot the wrong answer. They need to know the path to get to the right answer more than they need to just find the answer.
Yeah, yeah. Many faculty probably recognize what you're saying, but there's a tension, there's a contention between tradition and innovation, right? Or put another way, balancing rigor with evolving new ways of teaching. So, how do faculty balance that? So, they have to cover certain syllabus, They have to keep up with the rigor, but they also have to be innovative and allow students to have their own journeys, as you said. So fail in the process and learn for themselves. So how do faculty balance that?
No, I totally agree. Making your coursework connect with other areas, with ethics, with markets, with sustainability, or with other courses. You can do this without reducing the rigor, but it does take time, and it makes sense because it's valuable. It pulls together the curriculum and it drives the students toward better understanding of their course materials, and that's the reason why it's worth it. Because if they see this connection, then they'll take the rigor. They'll learn it because they understand why they need to learn it.
The book talks a little about setting goals. Either the faculty or the instructor helps the students set their goals, or students set their own goals, and engagement, right? So what you are saying beautifully touches on those topics. So from faculty perspective, what makes unlearning difficult?
Well, it's not the way they were taught. It's not the easy way. I mean, faculty have a lot of pressure on them within their job. The quality of teaching is hard to evaluate, and it's often not valued in the tenure path. So teaching the way you were taught is kind of the fallback. You have a problem set, a lecture, an exam. And it's easy to check off the right answer, wrong answer, get the grade. But evaluating a student's path to get to the wrong answer or their justifications, it takes time and a bit more creativity. And it takes the faculty unlearning that original path. It would be helpful if the tenure path valued quality teaching, not just the functional, you filled the role of teacher. I don't know that we're really there yet, though.
That's very true. So some systemic changes down the line need to be implemented, right? So the whole ecosystem
Hopefully
needs to shift, yes, and make it more student-centric. So going forward, so cool. So we talk about Keen principles in this podcast also. So the three Keen principles are curiosity, connection, and creating value. So engineering curricula are often highly structured, as we have been talking about it. How do you help students remain curious while maintaining the rigor expected in engineering programs?
So right now I teach, I work with the senior design program, and students are working on real world problems with industry partners. And I think that setup really works well as long as the projects are well scoped and well mentored. I was tangentially involved in development of the Common First Year program. And one thing that was built into this program was student agency. So allowing the students, within reason, to select the focus of their projects and the resources that they were using helped to keep them curious. It helped to motivate them because they chose the purpose. I think that's something that can really help to maintain the rigor.
So letting the students guide their own path, basically, rather than forcing it on them. So
within reason.
Getting inputs from them. So maybe setting the broad guidelines and let the students pick and choose their own path within those guardrails or something like that. That's a nice idea, and I believe some people try to do that. But again, we all know that there are limitations, right? So so. Do students sometimes need to unlearn the idea that engineering is only about getting the right answer? Because I see in my classes, I teach first year engineering, right? So they are focused, and at times even I have to hold myself back saying that no, let students come up with an answer, even though it's wrong. So how do we help students unlearn the idea that engineering is only about getting the right answer?
So sometimes students, particularly the high achieving students who've never gotten a B in their life, they can really have a challenge with that ambiguity of this learning style. It can really be challenging for them. They like solid goals and solid paths, and I know this equals an A. But in reality, if we're preparing them for industry, that path isn't straight. There's influences that are undefined. They're not clearly identified. There's connections to different ideas and different theories that lead you, and it all has to be grounded in sound environmental judgment. So helping them at an early stage to unlearn that kind of the tight boundaries that they set on themselves can actually be helpful to them in the long run.
Yeah, so ambiguity. When I started my engineering job in industry, I was taken aback by the ambiguity coming from many years of schooling. So that was a big learning lesson for me also, that ambiguity is second nature to engineering and to many other professions also. So yeah, another key principle focuses on helping students connect engineering knowledge with real world context. So given your industry experience, how do you help students see the broader system their engineering work affects? And I think the capstone projects might be very instrumental in doing that.
Yeah, I definitely think so. So in the design reviews in senior design, the students have a question. It's a line item in the rubric that's about how their project impacts global and economic, environmental, and social contexts. And for many students, they think this is kind of a throwaway question. But ABET has only 7 learning outcomes, and this is one of them. So this isn't a throwaway. When their industry partner hears their response, and sometimes students give kind of a non-answer or a flat answer, the industry partners often step up and press the issue. And they talk about how, well, our company doesn't do things that have no meaning because everything costs us money. So there's a purpose for what you're doing. Even if you're just selecting the correct fasteners for a device, you're furthering our company's goals in some way. And I think the industry partnership really serves to help them understand that.
Mm-hmm. That's a powerful shift. So from solving problems on paper to seeing engineering's impact on communities. So how can engineering programs better connect technical courses with social impact? You did say that engineering partners do help with that, but how can we as educators help highlight that?
So I think it's kind of easy in senior design to connect it because it's an industry project. But the challenge is really to connect the early coursework with impact. It's hard to connect a calculus class with an impact. And what helped me when I was an early faculty member was when I first started teaching, I had a mentor, Don Blackman, and he was a Citadel graduate. And he told me about how his instructors did consulting work on the side. They were not a research institute. They were just an undergrad institute. And all the faculty member had side jobs. And they would bring their side engineering problems into the classroom on a regular basis and use them to help teach whatever concept it was that they were teaching. Now, the problem with this is it's messy. The problems rarely stay within the lines of a single course. They bridge the courses, but they help students to learn additional information and to see how they had to make connections. And if we could somehow kind of harness what they did in the Citadel back when Don Blackman was a student, I don't know if they still do it, but back when he was a student, I think that would really serve our students well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's basically hands-on learning and multidisciplinary education. All those things are coming into what you just said. So right now we are kind of siloed. We have one course, we have another course, and they are linked, yes, but there is no direct connection with creating value or stakeholders or communities. So how can engineering students move beyond solving textbook problems to thinking about creating value for communities or stakeholders?
That's a hard one because the classroom is guided by the instructors. And I think the instructors really need to restructure their goals. Every student should be building experiential learning into their education plan, whether it's an internship or co-op or undergrad research or project-based learning. Doing this kind of experiential learning builds understanding of why they need to solve problems, not just to get a grade.
Now, does this kind of tie back into requiring to unlearn traditional notions of good engineering work?
Well, creating value requires making sense, not just executing a path to get to a solution. It's not solve problem 1 through 6 at the end of the chapter, but it's asking, are we asking the right question? Does this create value? What are the influences that we need to consider? What are the constraints? That's not extra information. That's required as part of the problem solving in the real world. And you can do this without reducing the rigor of your course. I think that's something important for faculty to hear, that this isn't about reducing the rigor. They still need to know the concepts. But if you include this, they're going to learn them in a way that sticks, that they actually remember.
Yeah. In my first year engineering course, the students usually arrive with strong ideas about what engineering education should look like. So what mindset do students bring with them that sometimes need to change?
So the mindsets that students bring, they're often looking at engineering as being purely technical or kind of value neutral. It is based in theory, but when we're solving problems, we add context, and with that comes responsibility. It's about understanding and decision-making and connections. And I think students need to see all of that as engineering, not just, I'm good at math and science. Another area that I think students should hopefully drop is that fast equals smart. And the book talks about this quite a bit, that people come from a lot of different starting points, and faster does not equal smarter. Sometimes you really need to wrestle with the problem, and there's value to taking your time to do that.
Yeah. And when I was preparing for our podcast here, Meg, one of the unique aspects of your career is that you have worked at both ends of the undergraduate engineering experience. You spent many years working with first-year students who are just beginning their engineering journey, and now you coordinate the multidisciplinary capstone program where students complete that journey. So having seen students at both of these stages, what are the biggest changes you notice in how students think about engineering from their first year to their capstone experience?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's not the same for all students. My answer to it would not be the same for all students. There are some students who I think are more forgiving of themselves when they realize that I don't know the answer, and I don't know what I need to know to get the answer. So what do I need to learn? And they're okay with that, with not knowing, and with, well, now I need to build the understanding to get to where I can solve the problem. And I think as first-year students, they sometimes look at, I don't know the information, therefore I'm not cut out to be an engineer. And it becomes kind of a diagnosis of who they are, as opposed to pointing them in a path. So I like to guide students toward that, toward being able to look at, I can't solve the problem. Okay, why not? And developing the path to what do I need to learn to get there?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to happen to them throughout their career.
Yep, that is so true. So this is a question coming from me as individual, wanting to learn. As I said, I'm teaching the first year program here. So if you could, given your experience and your first year experience and capstone experience, if you could redesign the first year experience based on what you see in capstone, what would you emphasize differently?
I had some input into the common first year. So some of my ideas were part of that collaboration effort.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really happy with how the redesign went in some ways. In some ways, it felt kind of challenging because we are still trying to cram 20 pounds into a 5-pound bag in some cases. I think when you recognize the idea that we're looking at what will students take away from it, not just what can we expose them to, then maybe you reduce the volume and you increase the depth a bit, mm-hmm. so that they actually come away with a greater understanding of what they do remember from the course versus the course was broad and shallow.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And along with teaching them the content, if you can also teach them how to learn on their own, because that's going to be a lifelong tool that they can take with them.
I agree. Yeah.
They can address the ambiguity and all the way from first year to final year and then into their workplaces. Yeah. So shifting gears to now faculty. So we did talk about faculty earlier, then we talked about students. So faculty also face challenges when experimenting with new teaching approaches. So what helps instructors feel comfortable experimenting with innovative teaching approaches?
Well, I think we've all experienced that situation where you go to a conference and you learn about new ideas and you come back with a list of 15 things you want that are great ideas that you want to incorporate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You can't. It's overwhelming and you can't do it. And then sometimes you get frustrated and none of it happens. So what I would like to see, what I prefer to see, is don't redesign it all at once. Go for a low-risk entry point. Change one assignment or one project, or how you introduce one topic, or maybe how you assess something, and get comfortable with it. Look for resources to support you, and then move on to the next. If you try to do the whole thing, it's painful because you get overwhelmed and you don't know where to put your resources, and you can't do it all at once. Now, with that being said, our College of Engineering redesigned the entire common first year and embraced Keen ideas all at one time, and we went big. And I think the effect was big, but I also think the commitment was big. We took a large group of faculty, and we had support from the Center for Teaching and Learning and from the Keen folks. And it took a lot to make that happen. And it's still being refined. It's not done. It won't be done for another year or two. But in reality, most faculty are teaching like 2 courses all by themselves. So you have to start small. And Keen is available. They have resources that can help. They have networking connections you can make with other faculty teaching the same courses, but keep it manageable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We have heard this before on our prior episodes also from faculty experiences that make small changes, small course adjustments are
absolutely
more powerful and they go a long way. Yeah. So can institutions play a role in this? How can they support faculty innovation?
So I'm the Keen leader on our campus, and I think that that part of our role is to put the resources in front of you, to show you what we have, and you pick from it like a buffet. Keen's very supportive in what the unlearning is talking about, but also in a lot of ideas about how to change your instruction and ignite students' curiosity and drive them to want to learn the material and figure out how to create value with it. They provide faculty training, networking opportunities, and Keen cards with ideas and resources and community to support you. And then there's additional university funding to fill in whatever gaps you need to facilitate this change. So it's there for you. We can expose you. We can kind of lead the horse to water. But it's up to individual faculty members to decide whether or not to take it in.
So this is very heartening to hear. Initially, when we started this conversation, we did say that the ecosystem needs to rearrange itself around student-centric learning. And I think the efforts that you just mentioned and efforts that are ongoing at other institutions are in that direction. So that's really heartening to see. Now coming to our final question. If engineering education fully embraced curiosity, connection, and value creation, along with willingness to unlearning outdated practices, what might engineering classrooms look like 10 years from now?
Well, that's a hard one. I think the change in education approach and the integration of AI is going to totally change how the students' time is spent in the classroom. I think classes are going to be more project-based, with theory dealt out in chunks as needed to support that progress. And I think there will be a shift toward more oral testing and peer testing of their understanding. And that there will be a value in explaining the path, not just finding the solution. The use of AI is going to be integrated into both the faculty's work and into the students' work. And that we'll be teaching students how to use AI ethically and to support their learning, not to replace it. And this will be better preparing students for problem identification and problem solving that'll serve society in their career. I think there's going to be big changes. It's exciting.
Yeah, it certainly is. And with AI, maybe we should have a series of podcasts just based on AI and how faculty are leveraging it and how they're helping students see it as an effective tool. So that is indeed quite interesting. And the more I think on this topic, I feel it's very difficult to predict how classrooms will look like in 10 years from now. So that's
agreed.
A difficult one. Yeah, that's true. So, but yeah, I'm excited, and I hear excitement in your voice too. So that's awesome. So Meg, thank you for sharing your insights and experiences today. I especially appreciate how you connected ideas from unlearning with the entrepreneurial mindset and the realities of engineering education. And to our listener, thank you for joining us for this episode of Going Beyond the Syllabus. I'm your host, Rohini Abhyankar. Until next time, stay curious and keep going beyond the syllabus.